Episode 17, titled Secure DNS, DNSSEC versus DoT versus DoH, and what each protects, we frame secure domain name system choices as decisions about integrity, privacy, and policy, rather than as a single turn-on security switch. The exam likes this topic because the acronyms sound similar, yet they solve different problems and can even create new operational issues when applied blindly. Secure domain name system design starts by asking what you are trying to protect, who the adversary is, and where the weak link lives, because those answers determine whether you need authenticity of records, privacy of queries, or both. It also requires you to consider the environment because enterprise networks value visibility and control, while untrusted networks and public access often value confidentiality of browsing metadata. When you understand what each technology protects and what it does not, scenario questions become much easier to decode because you stop choosing based on popularity and start choosing based on fit. The goal is to build a clear mental map that lets you select DNS security extensions, DNS over TLS, or DNS over HTTPS with confidence and without unintended side effects. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to the CloudNetX books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. DNS security extensions, commonly shortened to DNSSE, protect the authenticity and integrity of domain name system records, but they do not protect the privacy of the query itself. DNSS adds cryptographic signatures to domain name system data, so a validating resolver can confirm that the records came from the legitimate zone owner and were not modified in transit. This counters attacks like cache poisoning and on-path tampering, where an attacker tries to redirect users to malicious addresses by altering or forging responses. The key is that DNSSE is about the truthfulness of the answer, not the secrecy of the question, so observers on the path can still see which names are being requested if the transport is unencrypted. DNSSE also does not prevent a compromised authoritative zone from publishing bad data, because it only proves the data is authentic to the zone's signing keys, not that the zone owner is making wise choices. In exam scenarios, DNSSEC is the right fit when you need tamper resistance and verifiable authenticity for public resolution, especially for domains where redirection risk is high. Understanding that DNSSEC is integrity, not privacy, prevents the common mistake of choosing it when the scenario is clearly about query confidentiality on untrusted networks. DNS over TLS, commonly shortened to DoT, encrypts domain name system traffic between the client and the resolver, reducing on-path snooping and manipulation on that segment of the path. With DoT, the client's queries and the resolver's responses are carried inside a transport layer security session, which means intermediate networks cannot easily read the names being requested or modify the contents without detection. This improves privacy in environments like public Wi-Fi and other untrusted access networks, where observers could otherwise track browsing behavior or inject malicious responses. The scope of protection is important because DoT primarily protects the client-to-resolver leg, not necessarily the resolver-to-authoritative leg unless the resolver uses additional protections. It also shifts trust toward the resolver because the resolver still sees the queries and can log them. So you are choosing where you trust the visibility rather than eliminating visibility entirely. In exam logic, DoT is often a strong fit when the scenario emphasizes privacy from local network observers and when the organization can control or trust the resolver that receives the encrypted traffic. The correct answer usually acknowledges that DoT is transport privacy to the resolver, not global anonymity. DNS over HTTPS, commonly shortened to DoH, sends domain name system queries over Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, which blends name resolution traffic with typical web traffic patterns. DoH uses the same general transport and port conventions as web traffic, which can make it harder for intermediaries to distinguish domain name system queries from other encrypted Hypertext Transfer Protocol secure traffic. This can improve privacy on restrictive or monitored networks and can help avoid certain forms of interference that target traditional domain name system channels. The flip side is that blending can complicate enterprise policy because organizations that rely on domain name system-based filtering or monitoring may lose visibility if clients bypass local resolvers and send queries directly to external DoH endpoints. Like DoT, DoH protects the client-to-resolver leg by encrypting content, but it also changes how easily networks can enforce domain name system policy at traditional inspection points. DoT, therefore, is not just a privacy choice. It is a traffic classification and control choice, which is why exam scenarios often attach operational consequences to it. When you see DoH in answer options, assume the question is at least partly about visibility and policy impact, not only about encryption. Comparing what each control stops and what it cannot stop is the heart of best answer reasoning, because each technology has a different threat model and a different set of blind spots. DNSSEC stops tampering with answers by allowing validation of signed records, but it does not hide the names being requested, and it does not protect against a resolver that lies or logs aggressively. DoT stops passive on-path observers from reading or modifying queries between client and resolver, but it does not prevent the resolver from seeing the queries, and it does not guarantee the authenticity of the data unless combined with validation such as DNSSEC. DAH provides similar encryption benefits to DoT while making traffic look like general web traffic, which can reduce certain kinds of network interference, but it can also reduce the ability of networks to apply domain name system-specific policy. None of these technologies prevents the application itself from leaking destination information through other channels, such as server name indication in transport layer security, web requests, or application logs. None of them fixes misconfigured domain name system data, because correctness of configuration still matters. On the exam, the best answer is usually the one that targets the stated threat while admitting what remains unprotected, rather than claiming a single mechanism secures DNS completely. Operational impact is where many candidates get tripped up, because secure domain name system decisions can change filtering and inspection capabilities in ways that surprise enterprise environments. If an organization relies on local recursive resolvers to enforce policy, block malicious domains, or provide internal split-horizon answers, then allowing clients to use external encrypted resolvers can bypass that control plane. DoT and DoH can move resolution off the corporate resolver path, which can reduce the effectiveness of domain name system-based security controls, and can complicate incident response because the organization loses a centralized record of name queries. DNSSE, on the other hand, can strengthen integrity without necessarily changing where resolution happens, because it can be validated by the same recursive resolvers the organization already controls. The operational question becomes whether the organization wants privacy from local networks, visibility for governance, or a balanced approach where encryption is used but resolvers remain managed and observable. Exam scenarios that mention enterprise monitoring, compliance, or mandated filtering often penalize answers that would unexpectedly eliminate visibility. The key is to treat secure domain name system as a control plane decision, not as a purely cryptographic upgrade. Performance is another dimension that appears in scenario queues, because encryption can introduce handshake overhead and because resolver proximity affects perceived latency. Transport layer security sessions require negotiation and cryptographic work, and while modern implementations reduce this cost through session reuse and efficient handshakes, it can still matter for clients that make many lookups or for networks with high latency. Resolver proximity matters because the closer the resolver is in network terms, the faster it can respond, and encrypted transport does not change the fact that distance adds delay. DNSSEC can also add response size and validation work, which can affect performance and reliability in constrained environments if fragmentation or path issues occur. DoT and DoH depend on stable connectivity to the chosen resolver and may behave poorly if the resolver is far away or if the network blocks or throttles the relevant traffic patterns. In exam reasoning, if performance and user experience are emphasized, the best answer often considers local managed resolvers with appropriate protections rather than sending all queries to distant external endpoints. The point is that security mechanisms should be chosen with an understanding of their real-world costs, not only their theoretical benefits. A scenario where DNS security extensions is the right choice is when the requirement is tamper resistance for public zones, such as ensuring customers resolve a domain to the correct addresses even when attackers try to poison caches or intercept responses. In this case, the primary threat is that an attacker could redirect users to a malicious site by manipulating domain name system data. And the goal is to provide cryptographic assurance that the published records are authentic. DNSS addresses that by allowing resolvers that validate signatures to detect tampering and reject forged data. This scenario often fits public-facing domains because you cannot control the networks users traverse, and integrity protection reduces the risk of silent redirection. The operational burden is that signing and key management must be handled correctly, and that failures can cause reachability problems if validation breaks. In exam logic, when the scenario is clearly about protecting the integrity of public name resolution and resisting tampering, DNSSEC is the most direct and architecturally aligned answer among these options. A scenario where DNS over TLS or DNS over HTTPS is the better choice is when the requirement is query privacy on untrusted networks, such as remote users on public Wi-Fi or mobile users on networks that may be monitored. Here, the primary threat is not that authoritative records are being forged, but that observers can see which domains users are querying, potentially revealing sensitive browsing behavior or business activity. Encrypting the client-to-resolver path reduces that exposure and can also reduce the chance of local interference that tampers with responses. The choice between DoT and DH often comes down to policy and traffic management, because DoT is clearly domain name system traffic over a secure channel, while DH blends into web traffic patterns. In an environment that wants encrypted name resolution while keeping policy enforceable, a managed resolver using DoT can be a balanced approach. In an environment where networks are hostile or restrictive, and where blending with web traffic is beneficial, DoH may be chosen, but that comes with the trade-off of reduced enterprise visibility if not managed carefully. Exam scenarios usually provide cues about whether governance or privacy is the dominant driver, and your answer should follow that cue. One major pitfall is enabling DNS over HTTPS and breaking enterprise visibility unexpectedly, because DoH can allow clients to bypass the organization's recursive resolver and its controls. If endpoints start resolving names through external DoH providers, domain name system logs at the corporate resolver become incomplete. Internal names may not resolve correctly, and domain name system-based security controls can be bypassed. This can cause both security risk and operational friction, because troubleshooting becomes harder when visibility is fragmented across many external services. It can also create policy conflicts when the organization must enforce filtering, record retention, or threat detection based on name resolution. The pitfall is not that DoH is inherently wrong, but that enabling it without aligning resolver strategy and monitoring can produce unexpected control plane gaps. Exam questions that mention enterprise monitoring, compliance requirements, or mandated filtering often treat unmanaged DoH as a negative because it undermines governance. The best answer in those cases usually preserves managed resolution paths while still addressing privacy goals where appropriate. Another pitfall is misconfigured DNS security extensions causing validation failures widely, because DNSSEC is unforgiving when keys, signatures, or delegations are wrong. If the chain of trust is broken, validating resolvers may reject responses, and users can experience failures that look like the site is down, even when the service is healthy. These failures can be widespread because many resolvers validate by default, or because large resolvers enforce validation consistently. Misconfiguration can happen during key rollover, during zone signing changes, or during delegation updates, and the impact can be immediate and severe. This is why DNSSEC must be managed with careful change control, monitoring, and rollback readiness, because a mistake can cut off legitimate traffic. In exam scenarios that mention sudden resolution failures after a domain name system change, DNSSEC misconfiguration is a plausible cause, especially if errors appear as failures to validate rather than as simple no such domain responses. The correct answer often includes validation awareness and emphasizes careful operational practices when deploying DNSSE. A practical checklist for choosing among these controls is goal, threat, client support, resolver, monitoring, and fallback, because the best answer is usually the one that fits the environment end to end. Goal means you decide whether you need integrity of answers, privacy of queries, or policy enforcement, because those goals point to different mechanisms. Threat means you identify whether the risk is on path tampering, passive monitoring, resolver compromise, or enterprise policy bypass, because each implies different protections. Client support matters because endpoints must actually implement DoT or DoH correctly, and resolvers must validate DNSSEC or provide encrypted service reliably. Resolver choice matters because it determines who you trust with query visibility and how close the service is for performance. Monitoring matters because secure domain name system changes can create blind spots, and you need visibility into failures and behavior changes. Fallback matters because when validation or encrypted resolution fails, you need a predictable behavior that does not silently degrade security or break critical access. This checklist keeps you from picking a technology in isolation, which is the fastest route to unintended consequences. To close the core with a selection prompt, imagine a requirement set where an organization set operates a public domain that must resist tampering, while also supporting remote employees who connect from untrusted networks, and it must preserve internal filtering and visibility for corporate endpoints. For the public domain integrity requirement, DNSSE is the direct fit because it provides authenticity of records to validating resolvers, reducing redirection risk. For remote employees, DoT can provide encrypted resolution to a managed corporate resolver, preserving privacy on the access network while maintaining enterprise policy and logging at the resolver. DoH might be appropriate in some cases, but if enterprise visibility is a strict requirement, unmanaged DoH is risky because it can bypass internal controls, and the design must account for that explicitly. The best answer in this blended requirement scenario is usually a layered approach that matches each control to its threat model, rather than choosing one mechanism and expecting it to satisfy all goals. The exam is testing whether you can separate integrity and privacy goals and choose mechanisms that satisfy both without breaking governance. In the conclusion of Episode 17, titled Secure DNS, DNSSEC versus DoT versus DoH, and what each protects, the main takeaway is that secure domain name system is a set of choices about authenticity, confidentiality, and operational control. DNS security extensions protect the authenticity of records and counter tampering, but they do not hide queries from observers. DNS over TLS encrypts domain name system traffic to the resolver, reducing on-path snooping, while DNS over HTTPS does the same while blending with web traffic patterns, which can be helpful for privacy but disruptive for enterprise visibility. You compare what each control stops, what it cannot stop, and how it affects filtering, inspection, monitoring, and performance, including handshake overhead and resolver proximity. You avoid pitfalls like enabling DoH and unintentionally bypassing corporate controls and misconfiguring DNSSEC in ways that cause widespread validation failures. Assign yourself one compare and contrast rehearsal by taking a single scenario and stating, in one sentence each, which threat is primary, which control fits that threat, and what operational impact must be accounted for so the Secure DNS choice does not create a new outage or a new blind spot. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.